at Gen Con, and I'm here with my dear colleague Gus. Hi Gus, how are you?
Hey Eleni, how's it going?
Good, good. I'm trying to master my remaining energy because it's the last day of Gen Con, so it's been like really, intense. And well, Gus is responsible for most of the work that goes into organizing the show, especially US shows. Would you like to tell us exactly what it is you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So at US shows, we bring a lot of equipment to the show, which a colleague of mine handles. But what I do is I handle all of the people that we bring to shows. So we bring a huge staff of demo team members, which we call imps, to all of our conventions. And they're great because they are really experienced in teaching our games. But it's not just that they know the games really well, it's that they're actually really experienced in explicitly how to present our games at shows.
Yes.
Which works very differently from how you present our games in
exactly
how to play videos.
Yeah, so Gus's role is also preparing how we're gonna demo each game specifically. What's the best way to do it for shows? And that's sort of very similar in a way to how I go about preparing how to play videos and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very different situation and different parameters, but the core is like what's the best way, the art of teaching a game in specific scenario. So we have like rulebook making, which is a completely different thing.
Yes.
You need to have like all of the rules in there in a way that people can find them. That it's easy to understand. You can find anything you need in your rulebook basically.
One of the things that I have always found really interesting about board game rulebooks is the primary way they're used is not to be read out loud. They're actually kind of strange in this way, that the kind of concept of a board game rulebook is that a person learns it, then after they read it, they learn the whole game, then after doing that, they essentially put on a little show for the people who are going to play the game. They paraphrase, they rewrite things in their own words, they come up with a presentational style. It's rare that you're going to sit and just listen to a rule book being read, right?
Yes, that's true.
And a lot of what we do at conventions with CGE is driven out of this basic concept. If you're already going to paraphrase a rule book when you teach it, what's the best way you can do this at a convention?
Yeah, and also like the goal here at conventions is very different than learning every single rule that is in the rule book, right? Here people come and they expect to learn and play a game in like an hour and see if it is for them.
Playing a game at a convention is not only not like playing a game with your friends, it's not quite like playing board games at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
I often think of board games as a very relaxed hobby. It's a very cozy hobby, it's a very comfortable hobby, it's something that you can take your time in and really get to know people that you're with. Conventions don't really allow for any of that. At conventions, you're busy, you're tired, you're running around trying to see everything, and you often don't know the people that you're playing games with. You're often sitting down with a group that you've never met in your life. As a result, people's attention span at conventions is a lot lower than what you'd expect at home.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most important things, people do demos here to see if I like this game and should I buy it. So it's a very different sort of procedure. And I know that we, like here at CG, we have developed like a method for many years. And it's distilled in your you can talk about it, but it's like a very specific procedure that we have been implementing for many years here at CG. We do like tons of demos.
Yeah, one of the things that makes us unique amongst a lot of other publishers that attend conventions is that we explicitly have a methodology of teaching games that we expect all of our staff members to adopt. Most publishers sort of hire competent staff members and then let them approach teaching the game however they want. But we train all of our staff members to teach games by essentially not teaching the game at all.
Right.
Our staff members, our imps, when they start a demo, I instruct them that they should not be talking for more than 5 minutes before players start playing the game right away.
Right.
all of the rules of the game are instead integrated directly into the play of the game. It's a method that is developed and designed explicitly around learning by doing rather than learning by listening or learning by, reading a rule book.
Yeah.
So the history of how CGE has adopted this methodology at conventions is directly tied to Paul Grogan. Paul Grogan attended shows in Europe for a long time with CGE, and Paul noticed that a lot of things that he had sort of thought about teaching games didn't apply at conventions.
Right.
A lot of his best learned wisdom actually didn't work in convention spaces. And Paul, from my understanding, adapted his approach and methodology to what conventions felt like. And what's funny is that Paul is in many ways kind of in a similar space to you, right? In that he makes how to play videos that are very organized, formal, frontal, presentational. And I often think that in many ways, the way he thinks about those videos shows the way that he thinks about demos, or the way he thought about giving demos at conventions. In that he often thinks about how to construct those videos as step-by-step processes. That's a kind of big part of how he does things. And we think about this methodology in a step-by-step way as well.
Yeah. So for people, if someone comes to our CG room at Gen Con or other conventions, what should they expect from the art of demoing games, the way we do it? What's the drill? So
when you sit down at a table for a CGE game, the first thing that happens is the staff member, the first thing that happens is that the imp is going to tell you exactly what to expect. Gentlemen, are you ready? Great, okay, so welcome to Lost Ruins of Arnak. My name is Gus. What we're gonna be doing today is running a demo. I'm gonna run you through the first couple of turns, and I'm not gonna teach you all of the rules beforehand. So you're not gonna always know the context of your actions, but that's okay. After just 2 turns of the game, you should know all of the rules and be able to play on your own without my help. Arnak, luckily, is a pretty simple game. Setting expectations for these demos is really important because they're gonna work differently from any way that anybody's ever learned a game before. If people aren't on the same page, it's not gonna go well. They're gonna get frustrated or upset. But in my experience, by setting expectations for convention attendees, it's a lot easier to then prepare them for the experience they're about to have.
Yeah, and of course people don't expect to learn all of the rules for a game just to play a demo, right? I
think a lot of times they do actually.
Okay.
So because of heuristics, right? Because people in this hobby expect that before they take their first turn of a board game, they're gonna know everything they need to know about the game. Sometimes there is a bit of retraining involved with convention attendees because convention attendees are uncomfortable with the idea that essentially their first few actions in a demo game, they're not gonna know almost anything about the context of what's going on. That can be strange for people, actually, and can require some build-up and setting expectations. After you set expectations for your group, you then give a very high-level presentation of the game. You are all explorers who have discovered this ancient lost civilization, and you are trying to learn about it in 3 ways. You're gonna be trying to discover the physical locations of Arnak. There's all this undiscovered land. You'll be discovering new sites here and collecting these idols, which are worth points at the end of the game. You'll also be conducting research in Arnak. You've got 2 different research markers. You're gonna be trying to move those up this large research track on the right of the board. The higher these markers get by the end of the game, the more points you're gonna score. Finally, you're gonna be building a great expedition toolkit by buying cards to add to your deck. There's lots of cards available here at the top. You'll be buying those and you'll be able to use them multiple rounds of the game. Turns in Arnak are really simple. On your turn, you'll take 1 action. That's it. That would be my entire explanation before we start playing. That's all I would tell you before you would take your first turn. It's short, right? It didn't take me much time to go through that, but in many ways it gives you this high-level understanding of the 3 primary components of the game. Okay, I'm gonna be discovering sites, I'm gonna be researching, and I'm gonna be buying cards, which are the 3 cores of the game. And as long as you know that, you can filter every decision, even if you don't know the context, through well, the context is I'm researching or I'm buying cards. that often can be all you need.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, for me, I'm very much looking forward to actually play the game, and I think a lot of the people really primarily want to play the game, you know?
Yeah.
So the less rules, sometimes it's, you know, works in that direction.
After giving that high-level pitch to this point, the tricky part is transitioning from you talking to them playing. This is a subtle thing. Different imps do this in different ways, and it's actually one of the things that differentiates our demos is how do you move from kind of, here's me talking to here's you playing.
Okay.
What I often do is for the first couple of actions, I gently tell people what to do, while in telling people what to do, explaining the entire context surrounding it.
Right.
So, for instance, in Arnak, the first action that I always have people take is buying a card because it's exciting, right? You want to. It's a really exciting part of the game. So, what I'll do is I'll explain. Here's all these cards that you can buy. They all have costs in their bottom left corner. You can buy any of these cards you want. Sometimes if there's expensive cards, I'll have them play their funding to get extra money. But they don't know what any of the cards do, right? Yeah. So I'll say, you're going on an expedition in this ancient civilization. What would you want to take with you? Yeah. People kind of look and they're like, oh, I want the grappling hook because I want to explore, or I want a turtle because I want to ride it. But that, again, here I'm sort of giving the context of what's going on, that you're going to want this thing in your toolkit. But I'm not giving the context of here's every card, here's how they all work. Right. I'm just asking players to make a decision without a full understanding of what's going on, which is really different from what you do.
It's, very different. The similarity is that you're trying to make it as easy and understandable as possible. But I give a lot of context.
Yeah, you do.
Someone starts to understand like what they're supposed to do in the game.
And great rule books do that as well, right? Yeah. We've all read really bad rule books where you kind of are lacking context at certain points, where like an action will be explained before you fully understand what it's going to mean in the broader context of the game. Yeah. And that can be really frustrating when you're reading a rule book, because you'll often read that section and say, well, I guess I'm going to need to come back to this section and read it again once I understand what it actually means.
Yeah. Have you noticed like people wanting to know all the fluff and the theme? Because I'm one of those who I cannot start a game if I don't know like what is it about, like the theme of it. But I know people that want to dive into the mechanics. Tell me the mechanics.
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody's different, right? Everybody comes to this hobby for different reasons. Yeah. One of the subtleties of presenting a game at a convention is trying to figure out what is going to excite people at your table. Right. What's going to get them excited about this game? Yeah. So like, for instance, Alchemists is a really good game to talk about. If people have a background in academics or publishing industries or science, they'll often respond to the theme of that game really strongly. Because they'll say, oh wow, this game is a really funny game about chemistry and learning and kind of the abuse that happens to people in academic spaces. And that can be a really exciting part of the game for them. But if you're not that person, or you're a child, actually, to talk about Little Alchemists, that part of the game is actually not going to be very exciting to you. You're going to be excited about making potions, or taking actions, or the worker placement. So everybody's going to respond to different things in a game. For me, when I'm thinking about demoing a game, I kind of want to incorporate all of it. I want to do the theme, but I don't want to do too much of it. And I want to talk about the actions and mechanics, but I don't want them to overwhelm the theme. Like, one of my favorite examples of this in our catalog is Space Alert has kind of a abstract looking board. Each room in a ship of Space Alert has 3 buttons in it, labeled A, B, and C, that do 3 different actions. And to a group, this looks kind of abstract. The joke, though, is that in Space Alert, those buttons are literal. There's a big button in each room that is just a big square that says A and a big square that says B. So when you're teaching that game, you say, each room has 3 big buttons in it. The A button, the B button, and the C button. And there you've just explained the mechanic but you've also told the people something about the theme, right? Space Alert is a game about corporate mismanagement, about abuse of personnel, about streamlining and smoothing things down to the point that they don't actually help the people they're supposed to help. And the joke of that game is we made it easy. There's 3 big buttons in each room, but it's incredibly difficult in that game to press the right button at the right time. And so in teaching that mechanic, you've actually taught a little bit of the theme as well. Lots of beautiful stuff like that in CG's catalog.
Are there other steps in the way of demoing or other tips you instruct imps to do?
One of the things that's really important in executing this method successfully is that you only tell players things, you only give players new information exactly when they need it. You should never tell players information that they don't need to know at the moment it's happening.
Because they will forget about them first of all. Right? And then it's a waste of their demo time, I guess.
And it will actually distract them and confuse them and cause them to diverge from you. A huge part of executing this demo successfully is that you're all together. There is something kind of very team building about this. You take a bunch of people who don't know each other and you say, we're all going to go on a journey together, and you're going to be scared for the first few minutes because you're not going to know what's going on, but I want you to trust me. I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel comfortable. And after just a few minutes, you're going to be happy. One of my all-time favorite examples of this in CG's catalog is Letter Jam. Letter Jam, in many ways, is about guessing a secret word that you've been given at the beginning of the game. You're given a certain number of letters, you try to figure out what each of those letters are. At the end of the game, you spell a word using those letters. When you demo the game, we don't tell anybody anything I just told you at all. We don't tell you that you have a word in front of you. We don't tell you that you're trying to figure out what your word is, because you actually don't need to know it in order to play the game. All you need to know is you have a letter in front of you that you can't see. You need to figure out exactly what that letter is, and you need to help all of your team members figure out what their letters are. That's it. And then after, your 30 minutes of a demo, you say, okay, you figured out what 4 letters are, now spell a word.
That's cool. Straight to the point.
But it's weird. It feels weird to us because that's the point of the game. Like, you win the game by figuring out what those 4 letters are. We don't tell people what the point of the game is until the last 5 minutes of the demo. Because it's not necessary information at the time. So a lot of executing this method successfully is figuring out exactly what's necessary when and directing people through that information in such a way that they're never learning something they don't need to know right now. One maybe weird thing about me that reveals why I like CG's methodology so much is when I'm reading a new rulebook, I skip all the preamble. I skip here's all the phases, any of those lists of all the phases, any list of the broad overview of the game. For me, I need to get right to, okay, what do players do on their turns? That's always what I skip directly to. I read exactly what players do on their turns so I can understand how the game kind of works. And then I read the high level stuff. And again, not everybody does that. That's not what everybody wants. There are actually people on the CGE team that I've had arguments with about rulebooks of whether we should have those high-level overviews or not. But for me, it's so important to have that more linear development, at least in my brain, of okay, what do I do? How do I do it? And what are the consequences of me doing it? Which is exactly how we structured the demos.
Yes. So is there anything else people should expect doing a demo with us?
Expect to have fun if you trust us. And that's the key, right? If you trust that we're going to give you a great experience, we will give you a great experience. We have very talented staff members, some of whom have been doing this for years, who really know their stuff, who really know how to guide people through a game. And if you trust us and kind of join us on the experience, we promise you'll have a good time. Even if you don't like the game, I think you'll have a good time demoing it.
There's something very cozy, I think, in the way we do the demos.
That's an important piece. We do not approach our demos as direct pipelines for selling a game. We understand that our games aren't always for everyone, And our
That's
games
true.
are all really different. We don't expect everybody to play who plays a CGE game to like every CGE game.
Yeah.
What is important for us is to make sure that even if a game's not to your taste, you still have a good experience and understand what the game is.
Yeah,
even if you don't like it or don't want to buy it, that's actually not that important to us.
Yeah. It's about the experience that you're having at the moment. Yeah.
That's something that I train all of our staff members on, is not to lie, not to embellish anything.
Of course.
A great example is if somebody asks you how interactive Starship Captains is, you can kind of lie about it a little bit. You can be like, well, there's these pirates that block routes, and there's these missions that you can claim, and so the game's really interactive.
Yeah.
But the truth of that is that's a little far from the truth, right? It's like, well, there's some blocking and action priority, but the game is mostly about developing your own ship and your own crew and your own technologies. That's the true answer, and it's the answer that I really expect and train all of our imps to give.
Yeah.
That we really don't want to give a false impression of what any of our games are.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gus, for telling us all about the demos. I hope people get to experience our art of teaching demos here at CGE. We hope to see you at one of the conventions. We gotta get back to our duties for today. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.
Bye. Bye. I'll do it without my voice cracking.